Alright, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Hopefully you all are staying safe with all the chaos that's taking place, so please keep your head on straight and utilize common sense, even though apparently it isn't so common. But anyway, let's jump right into it. I was recently reading that Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You has gone to #1 again. This would mean that this is now a song that has gone to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in 3 separate calendar years, and she now holds that record, which is kind of cool. It kind of shows that, you know, no matter how chaotic things may be, sometimes something as simple as music can kind of bring a different kind of energy that makes people feel good. And so no matter how old a song is, if it's made that connection initially, that connection is always there, which is pretty dope. I remember we had a conversation in the past about Chubby Checker's The Twist, and how back in the day that was a song that went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 2 separate calendar years. It went to #1 first in 1960. You know, it had the really popular dance. All the kids ate it up. And then we jumped to 1962. And the parents discovered, like a whole different generation discovers the song, and then they jump on it as well, and it returns to the top of the chart. So it's kind of cool how music can kind of have its own storyline or its own lifespan depending on how people receive it. So good for her. In regards to holiday music, if I have favorites, because even with Mariah Carey, I'll be honest, I'm not too crazy over All I Want for Christmas Is You. I think my favorite Mariah, she has a lot of Christmas stuff, but my favorite, I guess, I really like the When Christmas Comes song. And I like her version of Oh Holy Night. And it's funny because I remember the first time I heard it, I was just about to skip because I'm like, dang, this song boring. And then, you know, she got to that second half and kicked it into second gear into the Mariah notes, and that's a very great vocal. If you've never heard that take on Oh Holy Night, I'm like, dang, she was like singing on this. Wow, like that's a dope vocal on that one. So that's always really good. But other favorite holiday songs, I really like BB and CeCe Winans' Jingle Bells. That's like a nice, smooth R&B groove. I'm like, I forget it's a Christmas song. Like, I like all the Christmas songs that got a little oomph to it. Something you can kind of, you know, just rock out a bit to. So like that. Boyz II Men, Let It Snow is a good one. Really good vocal on that as well. That's a fun one to sing. Toni Braxton and Shaggy, Christmas in Jamaica is a good one. But I like the remix. You know, there's an album version that's, you know, it's cute. But there's a remix that has like some extra thump, like a dun boom, like I remember the first time I heard it, I said, what kind of Christmas song is that? What kind of Christmas is this? You forgot you were supposed to be going Christmas shopping. But that's a dope one. There's a whole bunch. I also like the Jackson 5, Up on the Housetop. Like, I think that's one that's always overlooked because they always like gas up Santa Claus is Coming to Town by the Jackson 5. But that Up on the Housetop, Michael was singing on that one. Like, that's some vocal right there. Like, he was singing like he was trying to convince his parents to let him celebrate Christmas already. Got them kids singing about all them Christmas songs and they can't even celebrate it. Ain't getting no toys under the tree. But, you know, those are some good ones. But I always like holiday music. It's funny because I'm not even a big Christmas person. Like, I can tell you right now, I've had a Christmas tree. It's down here somewhere. But there's a Christmas tree in a box that's set down in there for like 5 or 6 years. I've never put a Christmas tree up. The only tree I have is... can I grab it? Hold on, y'all give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back, my bad. I just thought of this while I was making the video. But, okay, so the only Christmas tree thing I actually put up is, okay, I got this. This was actually, I took this out of my grandma's house after she died, but her neighbor made her like this ceramic Christmas tree thing, and there's a whole bottom to it with like lights and stuff. You plug up the light and plug it up. I'm afraid to use it because it was made in like 1971, and I just know if I plug it up, it's gonna short circuit and burn my place down. So I just let it sit there with the decor. But this is the only like holiday thing I actually put out every year, and that's more so just because I miss my grandma. But yeah, I don't know, for the last few years I haven't been a big Christmas person. Maybe when I have my own kids, I'll jump back into it. I like to give to people. You know, I love to give gifts and everything. I love like at my center doing like the Toys for Tots and the holiday party, but I'm not big on Christmas. Birthdays either, to be honest, but it's okay. So hopefully you all enjoy yours. Anyway, let's jump into the next topic. So for this next story, I'll be honest, I'm not even sure how accurate this is. And I only say that because sometimes when it comes to a place like North Korea and the stories that are put out, due to the fact that we have a very sketchy diplomatic relationship with a place like North Korea, and the United States doesn't really have a very heavy media presence there. Sometimes the information that comes out about North Korea is accurate, and there's other moments when it's exaggerated, and I think that kind of plays into the role of painting the picture of American exceptionalism and making it seem like, you know, we just have it so together over here. But, you know, sometimes things come out it's a little sketchy. But anyway, it's being reported that it's the 10th anniversary of the passing of Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il. And so the people are pretty much being ordered to participate in 10 days of mourning. And so the stipulations that are aligned with what's being reported is that the people are not allowed to really go with a business as usual mentality when it comes to this 10-day period of mourning. So there will be no elaborate parties, no grocery shopping. People cannot continue as if everything was just fine and dandy. They have to actually show the remorse and show the sadness. And there's been different little documentaries and stuff I've seen where it shows when they have those public gatherings and the people are in the streets crying and mourning, and it's being reported that when people don't mourn hard enough, they could get in trouble. And so I saw a part where it was like, okay, they can't even have funerals. So like, listen, if somebody in your family dies, you just gotta wait. You're gonna have to mourn for 10 days before you can mourn your people. And then the part that got me the most was when I read that no laughing is allowed in the whole country and can't nobody laugh. And I was like, well, how do you enforce that? And listen, I don't want to be there to find out, but I said, that's interesting. And so some of my friends, we were in a group text, and I was like, man, you know, if we were in those shoes or they did something like that in America, like, I don't think we'd make it, because, you know, we clown too much. We don't know how to be serious when it's time to be serious. Even when it's a serious moment and we try, there's always that one friend that's going to mess it up and do like a and it's over. And so I think that just comes from the fact that, one, I already come from a family where we clown in my family all night, all day. You have to have some thick skin to be in my family, because at some point you will get fried up often. Like, here's an example. So I remember, and this is probably the worst example. Y'all are going to be like, what kind of family does he come from? But I remember when my father died and when we had the funeral. So the funeral happens, beautiful service. I was fine the whole funeral. Like, I didn't even cry. I sat and enjoyed the music and what was said, and it was a very nice service. And then we got to the gravesite. I was fine at the gravesite. They did that whole bit. And then you know how they get to the portion where, you know, it's right before the casket gets to go on the ground. And so everybody else has already gone to the limos because, you know, it's time to eat now. Everybody done cried and we made our peace, and let's go ahead and eat and fellowship and keep it moving, and life will go on and you will hold on to the memories. And so I'm standing out there still because we had already requested that they don't put the casket in the ground until the family leaves. So it's pretty much me standing in the way of the casket going in the ground. And so I was like, well, let me just touch the casket like one more time. I just wanted to touch the casket because I knew this was the last time I was going to be this close to my father. And so, you know, I touched the casket and I was good. So I was walking to the limo and then something told me, nope, turn around, get one more last touch, one more good touch. And so that one more good touch got me, y'all. I got to the casket and touched it, and my cousin Brandon was standing next to me. Then I had my aunt come. And I, you know, like when black women give you that nurturing hug, you know, it's all right, baby. That just, let it all out. Oh, man. I had a moment for like 8 seconds where I just had an outburst. Like just like 8 seconds, it just came out, and then I caught myself because I was like, wait, I'm fine, I'm good. Come on, let's go. And so when that happened, I didn't want to go back to the limo because I knew the whole family was already in the car waiting to fry me up. Like, bro, we trying to eat, and you done made it through this whole service just fine. You want to wait till it's time to eat, the one to lay out by the casket. If you don't get in this car. And so I remember I got to the limo, and just as I suspected, I see my mom, my brother, everybody like looking at me, and oh my god, that limo ride was the funniest thing. But you know, it's just crazy. That's just the kind of family I come from. I'm gonna tell one more story, by the way. If y'all don't want to hear my stories, just go to the description and jump to the next story. It's my channel, I can do what I want. And so I was thinking, because it made me think back to, I told this story in my podcast, and I think it's actually the episode about my father passing. But I remember when I graduated from college, I went home for like a year and a half. Stuff wasn't aligned, I didn't have my stuff together, and so life came and hit me. So I was back home with my family, and around this time, my father decided he wanted to start a men's choir at the church. Now, to put this in context, my father is a very musical person, but he's not very musically talented. He loves music. I think I get my musical ear from him. A lot of my favorite entertainers are my favorite entertainers because he liked them first. And so he has a musical ear, but he's not really, you know, if we're in a car and there's a song playing, he might be able to kind of sing along, but if you push pause or turn the volume down and he has to sing on his own, he's going to take you in a direction where you don't know where the song is going. He doesn't really understand, or he didn't really understand pitch and stuff like that. And so when he said he was going to start a choir, I was like, what? Okay. All right. And so, you know, now mind you, we go to like this storefront church that has like 20, 30 members. It's one of those churches where everybody participates in everything or something. So, you know, it's one of those churches where when they say, you know, let's give it up for the choir, half the church goes up there. It was like one of those churches. And so my father and this men's choir, they rehearse for like the next 2 months because they're going to have this grand premiere at one of these second Sunday night services, right? And so my father and them, you know, it was him and like 4 or 5 other men, and they're all in their 50s and 60s. So what they were trying to give, like the Williams Brothers, Cool and Water type thing, if you know that song, or maybe even like the Canton Spirituals, Clean Up What I Messed Up. That's kind of what they were trying to give us. And so it's finally the Sunday where they finally get to perform. And mind you, my dad's been coming home after the rehearsals and fussing about who wasn't taking what serious and how it's going to be explosive and it's going to be a showdown. And at this point in time, I was also directing the regular choir at that time. That's another story. That's in a podcast episode as well. And so it was almost like we had a friendly competition over who was going to do what. And so anyway, we get to church. I bring my camera because I already know what I'm about to witness. I know this is about to be some chaos. And so I bring the camera because this is back when I still didn't even have a smartphone yet. I still had the flip phone. But something told me, put the camera down. Don't be mean. Your dad is passionate about this. Do not hurt his feelings. So I left the camera in the car. I'm so mad. I still want to fight myself for doing it. So anyway, we get in there. They introduce the men's choir. The men come up, right? So it's like 5 of them. And so this is the scene. I'm in the back because, again, this is a church where you got to participate. I'm ushering, so I'm in the very back, which was my saving grace. I'll get to that in a second. My brother's on the drums. He's not playing. He's just kind of sitting there. And my mother at the time was still preaching, or she used to preach. And so she was sitting on the side pulpit. So everybody's exposed. Nobody can really hide. Everybody sees everybody because the church ain't that big. The men start. There's one guy who kind of has it together. He brings out his keyboard. He has this prearranged track he's made in the keyboard. And so he hits the play button and the little like that starts coming. And I'm like, okay, we in a juke joint now. Okay. And so they're supposed to do this call and response song. So the guy's going to sing a line and then they sing a line. He sings a line and they sing a line. They just repeat after him. And so he starts and he does like a Our Father. And so they're supposed to repeat after him, but for some reason, when they all come in, they could not come in at the same time with the Our Father. So what you hear is him go, Our Father, and then they go, Our Father, and I'm already losing it in the back, like, oh God, dang it, and I'm cussing myself out because I didn't bring the camera. So I'm in the back dying, but trying to hold it together. So fortunately, because I was in the back and I was an usher, I just kept walking out and kept going into the vestibule. Like I just go in the back every single time because everybody in that congregation was trying to hold it together, like near and dear, right? And so like every time I'd walk back in, somebody would hit another weird note and I would just turn back around and go right back out. And I looked at my brother like he had his head down on the drums, just down there shaking and everything. My mother's whole body is turned to the wall. I can't even explain what it sounded like, but this clip is probably the closest thing I can kind of relate to the regards of how chaotic it sounded.
Something about the name Jesus. Something about the name. Something about the name.
By the way, that clip cracks me up. The part that gets me is the fact that the whole congregation is laughing. I'm like, y'all are messed up. Homeboy was feeling himself, and he knew he was about to give y'all a good choir boy note from, like, was the preacher boy from 5 Heartbeats when he did the falsetto note? He just knew, like, he stepped out confident, was about to kill it. Then y'all laughed at him. Messed up. But literally, like, that's kind of the same energy it was. And so this song, they do this song for like 8 minutes, y'all. It was the longest thing, and it was so funny, and there was never a moment that wasn't funny. That's what made it so hard. And like at this point, I'm trying to laugh quietly, but I was sounding like, how dogs sound when they sniff? I'm standing there like trying to not laugh, like just struggling, right? And so they get through the song. The service ends. Me, my mother, and my brother are in that car. Dying. I mean, we're and did you hear me? Oh my God. And so we see my father coming out of the church. Oh, he's coming. Shh. And so my dad gets in the car. Now my father already knows what kind of family he has. He knows that when he opens this door, we gonna get him. And so he opens the door and he tries to get us before we get him. He's like, don't anybody even say anything. And so as soon as he said that, that was like the trigger, and all of us just fell out. Like, I felt so bad. We laughed so hard in that car. Everybody, like, one of those good laughs where it hurts, like your sides. You feel like you got to breathe slowly because whatever you've compressed down from laughing so hard, it will not uncompress. And so, like, or decompress. And so we're in there dying. And then he wouldn't stop. He's like, no, seriously, y'all, how do we sound? Dad, I'm like, Dad, you're not helping the case here. It was the funniest day ever. But like I said, I'm not good at at keeping it together sometimes when something is funny. I'm either that friend that's gonna bust out laughing in your face, or I'm that friend that doesn't even laugh. I just say something funny and get everybody else in trouble. There was this girl, Leonda, that used to sit next to me in class in high school. I used to get her in so much trouble all the time because I would just clown all day. It would be to the point where the teacher would take away participation points. And so I remember one time this girl was doing like a presentation and she was trying to pass everybody some chocolate, but she kept coughing. And so I just made a face, and Leonda saw my face and just fell out dying. Tell me why the teacher took like 30 points off our presentation. And mind you, ours had already been graded and in the grade book. We had did our presentation like 2 or 3 days earlier. He took like 30 points off for like being disrespectful and laughing at somebody else. And I was just like, it's not even laughing at her, but you can't be passing out chocolates and stuff to people and you coughing on everything. Look, that's how we had COVID now. That's why we're here now. Anyway, sorry for the long story. I just wanted to give some comedic relief before we get into the heavier topics. So anyway, here we go. So can I tell you all a beef that I have at the moment? And it's crazy because initially I wasn't even going to address this, but I kept seeing the conversations on social media and I didn't like a lot of the responses I was seeing because I saw too many people caping for this or trying to give justification to the foolery. And I'm just like, man, I would expect a little bit more out of some of y'all. And so this conversation is around this whole movement where you have a lot of people using what you call the Blaccent, right? And when I say Blaccent, it's pretty much a term that a lot of people on social media use in reference to people that are not black, that present themselves as coming from a black experience. And so they adopt certain things that black people do, like how we communicate, and then they try to present it as their own experience. And a lot of these people have large platforms and they're really huge on TikTok and Instagram, and they're literally making a whole bunch of money doing a full mockery of what they think is blackness. And so initially I felt some kind of way because you kept seeing all these different conversations. And what's also very funny to me is, especially when you see it amongst the women, you know, with the men, I think it's kind of a little bit different, but you're seeing it as a more popular thing with women. Like with men, like a perfect example would be like Tom Hanks' son. You know, he wants to be from the Caribbean so bad. And so he's adopted that whole accent. He's out there and embarrassing himself all the time. But getting back to the women, what I found so funny is it's almost like every woman or young girl that has magically gotten this accent that magically appeared in the last 4 or 5 years, they all sound like they're from the same place. It's like this magical hybrid accent rooted in sounds from New Orleans, Atlanta, and Miami, and they've just been mixed into the blender. And for some reason, every popular white girl that thinks she sounds like a black person, or even there's some Asian women that are doing it as well, they all sound like they have that same kind of accent, even if they're from Aurora, Colorado, or Montpelier, Vermont. But for some reason, they sound like they're from, you know, deep down next door to Marietta, Georgia. And I'm like, okay, this is some BS, and I don't know why we're buying into this. And so my beef is, I keep seeing two arguments. One argument is, oh no, that's just the way they grew up. They grew up around black people. We gotta not be so obtuse and everything. And see, my beef with that is, the problem is there's too many people that want to be friends with everybody at any expense. And I'm not that kind of person. But no, there's, you know, that's how they grew up. They grew up around black people. That's what they know. And I'm like, no, it's not. You want to know why? Because honestly, tell them to upload a video of them at age 6 or 7 years old on Christmas opening presents and tell me how they sound. They don't sound like how they sound right now. I'm telling you that right now. A lot of people are not rooted in what it is that they're trying to emulate, and it's very obvious and it's very telling. And so I keep seeing people try to push that narrative like, oh, well, because they grew up in it, that's all they know. No, because again, when you talk about the conversations of where people pick up their practices and their languages, it tends to come from the household. That's why when you look at a child that's learning how to speak, especially if you've ever studied linguistics, when you look at how a child learns to speak, they get all of pretty much their inflections, everything that they do from mom, from dad, from everybody who's in the house and everything like that. And so that's why it's interesting with all of these people, you have yet to see any of them upload any clips from their early adolescence. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. Never. It's always, they're either adults or probably 17 or 18 years old. And I'm not even going to talk about the imaging as well. I'll get to that later. But, you know, you get that argument. Or you get the argument where, well, you generalizing your people. All black people don't sound the same. What exactly is a Blaccent? And I'm like, that's the question I'm trying to ask and find out too as well, because apparently they think they sound like something and I want to know what it is. And so if we want to have that conversation, yes, you are absolutely right. Black people do not all sound the same because, one, when we talk about language in the United States, black people's language, as far as dialect and everything, it varies upon region. Language is a very regional thing. The thing that has made things exposed is now social media is out. And so people who are all the way in Antioch, California can see what people are doing over in Greenville, South Carolina. And those people can see what's happening over in Detroit. And those people can see what's happening in Austin, Texas. And so we're now in this area where everybody's using the same communicative space. And so things that were once regional are now kind of like a national platform. You see that in music now. But still, it does not account for the fact that these people who are now of a certain age, where most of them were born before social media even came out, they are still not in a space where they're rooted in a certain kind of sound that they're trying to emulate. And so I think you have to dig deeper, because for some reason, every time people try to say, well, you know, all black people don't sound the same, I'm like, I get that. But the thing is, people are now mixing a bunch of layered conversations into a one-size-fits-all approach. When we talk language and linguistics, all right, there's conversations around dialect. There's conversation around diction, conversation around lingo and vernacular, even inflections or the nonverbal cues. All of those things are not something that you can just emulate. Either you have it or you don't. And what happens is a lot of these people get exposed so often. Why? Because if you just watch one of their videos, especially if they have a YouTube channel, you watch their videos for long enough, they'll say the same word differently 3 or 4 times in the same 4 minutes. I'm like, ooh, they didn't practice that one hard enough. And so I'm just not buying it. And then the thing is, when you see, just especially with these women, like I don't want to put any platforms out there because I don't want to give people any additional exposure. I watched one clip, I could have jumped through the screen, and the girl was like, well, I feel it. And I was like, okay. And the thing is, it's funny because no one sounded like that 5 years ago. As far as those who are playing this role, none of them sounded like that 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. It's almost like a City Girls album came out and they went home and started practicing. That's what I'm getting. Because again, how are you in Eugene, Oregon, but you sound like you're from Miami or Fort Lauderdale? Like, no, I'm not buying it. I'm not doing this with some of these folks. I'm not doing it. And so I have a bunch of beefs with it. And what makes it more entertaining is half the time you can just go and look at how their families talk. You can go look and see, what does mom sound like? Or what does dad sound like? What do the siblings sound like? Does the whole family sound like this? No. And it gets even deeper if you get to the grandparents level. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people where there is an experience where they grew up in black environments. But even then, a lot of people, especially when you talk white people that grew up in black environments or areas where there was a predominantly black population, what people tend to pick up, it tends to be the lingo and the vernacular. It's not always really the diction. It's not even the inflections. It's not even sometimes the nonverbal cues. These people that I'm seeing on social media, I mean, they're doing, you know, that pop thing some girls do. I can't do it when they, oh, I did it, that thing. You got people all of a sudden magically doing that now, and I'm like, wow, you weren't doing that 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Interesting. And so what's also interesting when we talk about language, especially amongst the black collective, black language constantly evolves and constantly changes, and people that try to adapt or adopt these personas, they have to constantly stay on top of things and stay in the know and practice, because black lingo, black verbiage, black everything changes and evolves over time. Like, I think collectively black people don't sound the same way we did just 15 years ago, depending on some of the things that we say. And again, going back to the regional conversation, there's certain things that we all do so differently depending on where you live within the United States. And that's one of the reasons why I have a beef with a lot of these people that are putting on this persona, because again, they all got the same accent. And I'm like, who is it that you're trying to emulate? It doesn't add up, because again, I just think of just regional things. Like, so an example is like, people in my family, for some reason, we don't say something unless we think about it. I always say something. You know, she's gonna try to tell me something like I say something. And mind you, that's not even anything regionally connected to Washington State, where I'm from. However, for some reason within my family, which is more so rooted in the South, that's one of the things that's always been said. Or my mother always says, know how. You know, I don't know why they doing it. They ain't got it know how. Like, that's something that's kind of an in-house, something you're gonna get from grandma or the great grandparents or somebody within a black collective. People who are not rooted in that experience, they're doing imitation. It's a mockery, it's a caricature. And for me, I feel some kind of way about it, because again, I guarantee you, as they get older, as they start coming into the late 20s and into their 30s and 40s, they're not going to job interviews putting on that same persona at all. Because now they recognize there's a game to be had and they know how to play it. And so I'm not doing it. I just think you're seeing It's very performative. And then when we get deeper, I'm only speaking language, but sometimes you can look at folks and you see even more. They start to do the extra bronzer and the nails, and now they got the baby hair coming way down here. And especially when it's white girls, it's funny because white women don't have edges. Okay, that's why Rachel Dolezal looks weird when she has cornrows. Like, look at a picture of her. Like, they literally grip and pull everything because white women don't have edges because they don't have baby hair. Like, that's not a thing. And so, again, you just kind of see that a lot of people have literally latched on to some of the most stereotypical and most extreme generalizations of what they think black people are and created a persona around it. And now they want to dictate and carry the conversation on what is blackness and then try to paint you out to be crazy because you feel some kind of way about it. I'm not doing it. I'm telling you I'm not. And see, the other thing is this. Like I said, there are people who, again, grew up in a space where they were surrounded by a lot of black people, but they were still true to themselves. Yes, there are some things that they adopt or adapt to, but they never tried to paint themselves to be something that they were not. I think this is one of the reasons why, even when we talk music, I think this is one of the reasons why somebody like a Tina Marie is very celebrated and beloved by a lot of black music listeners. Because yes, this is a white woman who was in love with black music, and so that's what she chose to make. And she never was one of the white entertainers that once they had an opportunity to cross over and go to the other side and become more pop and ditch the black audiences, they never did that. That's why Tina Marie, in my opinion, is one of the few white people that are what you call black famous. White people don't know Tina Marie. They don't follow her. They don't listen to her stuff. However, Tina Marie, and even as she did what she did, she never tried to be something she wasn't. She never tried. She knew that she was a white woman. However, she recognized that there was an environment she grew up in. There were certain elements of culture that she became a part of or adapted into, but she was still herself. She was still a white woman, and she knew it. And even as she got her accolades and got her fame, she never tried to replace or try to take the space of somebody else who was black. She just did what it was that she knew. And so I think because she had a respect for black people's experience, I think that's why so many black people took onto her as an entertainer. Because again, there's not a lot of people who are going to be willing to pretty much, what I would almost say, sacrifice what kind of revenue and wealth could have come had they decided to really shift and go into a more commercial sound. She never went that route. She stayed into what it was that was presented for her. And so we've seen that in pop music where a lot of mega pop stars, at some point, they have a phase where they want to be black. Because it's the cool thing to do. We're just so cool and so awesome. They want to be us. And so literally every major pop star has had some kind of moment where, you know, they latch into blackness when it's convenient. And then they jump ship and go back to whatever it is. We always talked about Miley Cyrus back in the day where, again, she latched onto some of those extremities of what she considered to be black culture. And so she'd be doing an interview. Oh, wait a minute, twerk, break, like every 5 minutes. And now, you know, and then she shifted and she went to this whole bluegrass and, oh, it was just a phase I was going through and I wasn't making the kind of music that speaks to myself. Like, and she was all earthy and whatever. And now she's kind of like a rock chick. And honestly, I think her music is better now with her doing the whole rock thing than when she was trying to emulate and twerk on the stage with the giant teddy bears or whatever else she was doing. Like, you see it. You saw with Justin Timberlake. I mean, he built a whole career off that. And it's interesting. I always think back to watching like the MTV Punk'd episode when he thought he lost his house. That whole smooth boy aesthetic was out the window. He was in there crying and calling his mom on speed dial. And as soon as he realized it was a joke, oh, dog, you got me. I'm not dealing with it. Like, folks, don't play around. I'm not the one. Like, no. And so for the people that keep trying to give a justification to this, do better. And again, the reason why I have so many beefs with this is because this is a multi-layered conversation and there's deeper elements to where this conversation could go. And so when we dig deeper and start looking at this from a structural standpoint, the reason I really have a beef with all of this is, again, because black people are still being punished for just existing as they are. And other groups of people get to constantly come in, ride our coattails, hijack any and everything that we do and get rewarded for it, and then we're still punished for being ourselves. It makes me think of, there was a comedian, it's this Asian woman, I think her name is Aquafina or something like that, but I remember she did a whole interview talking about why she would never do Asian stereotypes because, you know, it's insulting to her culture and heritage, but she has no problem building an entire career off doing what you call, I guess, the Blaccent or mocking what she believes to be his black culture, because that's literally how she got her claim to fame. And so when you dig deeper, I think of the woman April Christina Crowley. Now, she at one point worked for Google, right? She was really popular for like helping to expand Google's reach into HBCUs and start pulling more, you know, black, I guess you can say engineers and architects in regards to the tech world into a company like Google. And she made this entire Twitter thread, I don't know, maybe last year, the year before, just talking about, because she actually, I think, was fired. But she was talking about how, for all the great things that she did, her boss pretty much told her, well, you have that Baltimore accent, or you have that Baltimore accent. And so, it almost sounds like, you're just not professional enough to be in these spaces because, that accent is almost, it sounds like it's a disability. Like, she literally told this to the woman, and how she pretty much, you would never climb the ladder because people are never going to respect you because of how you present yourself. And she literally was fired just because of where she comes from and how she communicates. So again, when we talk about how anti-blackness is still weaponized against us collectively, this is the problem I have when I see people trying to play dress up or try to put on a role just because they want some social media clout. And it gets even deeper than that. You know what I mean? Because it's not even just her. Like, I think of Ryan Coogler. Somebody like Ryan Coogler, the movie director, he doesn't like to do a lot of interviews because people constantly mock him for how he sounds with how he presents his words. And this is the last person that I really would want to ever vouch for in life. So this might be the only time you ever hear me do it. But even freaking Clarence Thomas, one of the reasons you don't hear him speak a lot on the bench is because he's embarrassed of his accent. One, he's Gullah Geechee. He doesn't like to acknowledge it. But yes, his people are right there from Savannah, Georgia. His people right over there from Yamacraw, or what you would call, something diffuse island. I'm saying it wrong. Something we call it Yamacraw, but there's a more professional, or not professional, but a more official name for it. Diffusky Island, I think. That's where his people are from. But he's been technically somewhat embarrassed of how he sounds, and so he felt that in order to climb, he kind of disguised that and not really push it out there as much. And so when we talk about the idea of blackness and how multi-layered it is, and how no matter what it is that we do, we're always on the receiving end of some nonsense. That's what I'm talking about. And on top of that, all of these people that do these Blaccents, they're silent when it's time for them to speak up. I don't remember seeing any of them saying anything in regards to what's been happening to Black America in regards to something like police brutality. And don't bring up a conversation about reparations. Then they want to fight you. Because now they either want to be a part of it and they want to say that, well, they get a piece too, or we don't need anything like that. That's going to bankrupt the country. That ain't my problem. Y'all need to figure it out. But so my thing is this. I'm not a fan of that. Don't come around me with that nonsense. I'm going to look at you like you're crazy, especially if you try to justify and make it seem like it's okay. Like I said, there are people who have grown up in certain experiences, but you can tell when somebody's rooted in something, when somebody's not. And pretty much 9 times out of 10, especially in this social media era where this magically became a thing where you started seeing more people do this more often, and you see this, like I said, this hybrid Miami, New Orleans, Atlanta accent that's magically popped up all of a sudden. Like, no, these people are not rooted in that. That's not their experience. I don't care how black their friends were. At the end of the day, when they get home to mom or get to grandma or they get into a family space, I guarantee you some of that goes out the window. When they go and apply for these career jobs and they're climbing that corporate ladder, all of that goes out the window. It makes me think to a lot of the white girls I went to high school with or even middle school with, that they were down, they would sit at the black table, they were cool, they wanted to run with us and everything else like that. And I see them now and they are some of the whitest women I know. You know what I mean? Like they recognize that, hey, in order for me to climb, I'm going to have to kind of brush some of that off. Oh, that was a phase I went through. You know what I mean? And so it's even funny. Sometimes on something like a Facebook, when people start throwing or posting the throwback pictures, they won't post anything from middle or high school because they don't even want people to remember that that's how they used to present themselves. So I'm not doing it. That's the beef I have. I don't care if you disagree with me. I promise you I'm not losing any sleep over this. Don't play games. All right? Anyway, moving on. So with this next story, many of you have already been following it because it's kind of been in the news. I just want to kind of give the updates as they continue to come along and jump into a deeper dive. And so many of you have seen the video of the judge that was caught on camera using the racist slurs. Her name was Michelle Odinet. And in the video that goes viral, I'm not going to post it because at this point, you already recognize where the energy is coming from in regards to what it is that they say in these viral moments. So we don't even have to watch to go ahead and put the story together. But in the video, she and it sounds like her sons are watching a video of a home invasion and they're giving commentary. And in the video, you hear her using the N-word a whole bunch. You also hear her pretty much comparing black people to roaches. And so the video goes viral. She gets backlash. There's lots of controversy. People want her to step down. She's pretty much been placed on leave at the moment. They actually put in her replacement judge. This is the replacement judge on the corner. I don't know a lot about the replacement judge, but hopefully that judge is not doused in a bunch of foolery like this one is. And so anyway, she responds to the backlash and kind of wants to clear her name. And so this is her reasoning as to why we heard what we heard in that video. I was given a sedative at the time of the video. I have zero recollection of the video and the disturbing language used during it. Here's my thing. Why is it that every single time somebody gets caught doing something very anti-black or very racist, they always have some kind of justification about the racism that has nothing to do or no kind of correlation as to why they would behave in the way that they behave. And somehow they try to paint it to be, I was drunk. Listen, if you're drunk, how you feel about black people doesn't change. Just the delivery and how you present what it is that you feel may be presented a bit differently, but how you feel does not change and it's still going to come out. Save it. Or they'll do the thing where, I'm having a hard day or having a hard time because my cat died or, something crazy. Kind of like, you remember there was a clip where the guy went viral, I think last year or the year before, with the whole "it's above me now," where something happened at the hotel and they called him the N-word and something like that. So all of a sudden they didn't have rooms at the hotel and the lady, please, we've had a long flight, we've had a hard day, the same kind of nonsense. Or it's, in this case, sedative. We took a sedative, or I took a sedative. I don't even remember anything that was said. And I'm like, well, why is it that those are the first things that come to your mind as soon as you take something that takes you out of your space? I don't buy it. Secondly, sedatives tend to bring you here. If you listen to the video, she is on a high right there. I'm like, woman, please. Or people will even go and they'll pull the, something around a mental health issue that they have. And I'm like, I'm tired of people doing that as well, because I think it's offensive to people that actually do have issues that they battle with. Just because you got caught being racist does not mean you get to latch onto anything and grasp for whatever straws you can grab to pull yourself out of whatever situation you're in. And so at this point, the new DA that's in the area wants an investigation into all of the cases in which she's overseen, because there's no secret that probably there have been people who have gotten an extremely punitive consequence or sentence under her watch, because this shows that, hey, this is already how she feels about black people. Some people always say, black people are too emotional. What's the big deal? She said the N-word. Y'all use it in rap music all the time. All kind of different things that people want to say. But at the end of the day, when you're in a position of power that plays a role into the livelihood and well-being of others, it is important that your stance in how you see the world is not anything that is discriminatory towards any group of people based on their existence. And so that's the problem that we're running into, because when we talk about the judicial system and the prison industrial complex and even police brutality, that's one of the main issues we're running into, is where you have these people who are racist, who do not like black people, who have envy or spite, or they literally just want us to die. And so they're going to do any and everything to continue to make life for black Americans terrible. Or they don't have sympathy or empathy for the experience of black people who have been done wrong, and they don't get fair sentences in regards to if they're fighting or suing for something, or on the other side, if they do make a mistake or something does happen and now it's time for sentencing. The book constantly gets thrown because, again, black people, in a lot of times when you talk about the lenses that some of these people see us through, we're not even seen as decent human beings that are deserving of grace or mercy. It's throw the book at them, make an example out of them. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's important that you do bring attention to these kind of things, because we can talk about this from a more systemic approach. I see another case that for some reason you don't hear it in the media, but I keep thinking of the judge out of Tennessee, Rutherford County, Donna Scott Davenport. Now, her case is very interesting because when you follow her track record, now, mind you, she only practiced law for 3 years before she got to go on the bench. She was elected. And this is one of the reasons why, where I always say, I recognize the frustration in regards to what is happening in politics, because politics is always going to be a mess in this country. But I still think it's important to pay attention to detail and long-term results about certain decisions that are made collectively. And so one of the flaws that has taken place in our politics is we have a lot of crooked judges that have been appointed and put into positions of power that continue to make life even more difficult for different groups of people. And so with Donna Scott Davenport, she was a judge that oversaw a lot of the cases in regards to juveniles and in regards to youth. And so here's some numbers, right? So 48% of the youth that were referred to her in regards to having to go before the judge in regards to any kind of case that were juveniles, 48% were sent to some kind of prison system, juvenile detention center. 48%, Rutherford County, Tennessee. The state average for youth that are sent before a judge that end up behind some kind of bars or in some kind of juvenile detention center is 5%. 48%, 5%. 48%, 5%. And when you really dig into the detail, it's no secret that the majority of the children who have been locked up are black kids, right? And so as we get even deeper, I was looking at one of the stories that pretty much kind of blew up her spot anyway. And so There was a school where these little boys had a fight. This is elementary age kids. These are 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, right? And so the children that did not intervene to break up the fight were all arrested. And so they ended up arresting 11 children under the guise of criminal responsibility for conduct of another, which is not even a real law. That's kind of like some crap that people just kind of put out in the mix within that area just to find a reason to lock up more kids, right? And so the justification behind that kind of policy is just saying, oh, if something terrible is happening, you need to step up and do something. And to put that burden on an 8-year-old, because when you talk about the kids that were arrested, one of the kids that was arrested was an 8-year-old girl, you know, with pigtails, literally pigtails, barrettes and stuff, locked her up because she watched the fight. And so as someone who works with kids, I always tell the kids and the teens I work with, please don't be a face in the crowd with that kind of stuff anyway. And it's not even about being locked up, but it's just recognizing that, you know, even with schools, a lot of times, schools will sometimes suspend kids that are there watching or instigating or recording. But my other thing is, in this modern day and time where schools are getting shot up literally every week, I just don't think that if a kid gets beat up and they have vengeance and they're mad and they want to come back and spray everybody, you don't want to be one of the people in which they remember your face standing in the crowd watching and enjoying, because you might be the first person they want to shoot if they happen to run into you while they're doing whatever crazy nonsense they're doing. And so anyway, the crazy bit is, of those 11 children that had to go before this judge because they watched the fight, and this is not to give a pass to the children for watching the fight, but that burden should be on the adults at the school, the staff. That's something they kind of manage. Why should you expect an 8-year-old to go and try to break up a fight? Now the children get hurt. In the same way where they say in modern times with schools that have these fights at the middle school level and high school level, where teachers no longer really step in because for the teacher's safety as well, you know, they don't step in. Why do you want to put that burden on a child to go and step in? You know what I mean? That's how I'm looking at it. But 4 of the 11 children ended up having to serve time for standing and watching little boys fight. And we know when it comes to fights, there's different layers and elements to how that all works. An elementary school fight with some 8-year-olds is not the same as a fight with some 16-year-olds. 2 totally different platforms, 2 totally different spaces, but you saw what happened. But then I always say this, when it comes to some of the things that are systemic and oppressive, even in politics, I always say, follow the money. Follow the money. So when you dig deeper into what was happening within that specific county, you know, in Rutherford County, if any child goes into a juvenile detention center, it is a charge of $175 a day. Yes, depending on where you live, people have to pay to be in jail. I said that about Fairfax County's jail system as well. You end up paying a certain fee to be in jail, and that happens all across the country in different regions. And so it makes you question, like, well, I wonder if there is some kind of backdoor deal that she has signed where if you can get more kids behind bars because that raises money for the county, there's going to be some kind of incentive for that judge, because we've seen that happen before. We saw that happen with Mark Ciavarelli. He is the guy out of Pennsylvania that was sentenced to 28 years in prison because he pretty much got bought out and started locking up a bunch of kids. With his case, and this was a very interesting one, I think, and you know what's really funny? You know, a judge recently just threw out like one of his appeals because he wanted his sentence to be commuted or less, you know, make it a smaller sentence because he thought 28 years was too harsh, and the judge was like, no, not on my watch. But, you know, what's interesting with his case is in the county that he worked in Pennsylvania, like this was, and there's layers to this. It wasn't even just him. There were people above him. The people above him had convinced the county to close their county juvenile detention center and support 2 privately owned prisons or juvenile detention centers that were privately owned. And so the owners and the people who were doing the negotiations in regards to those private centers or detention centers, they were able to convince the judge that, hey, the more kids you lock up, we have incentives for you. And so he ended up receiving $2.8 million to lock youth up. And between 2003 and 2008, 4,000 youth had to serve time under his watch due to different things that he put kids in jail for. And the crazy part is, a lot of kids hadn't even done anything that was out of pocket. It would be something as simple as, sometimes teenagers have those moments where they spaz out at home. They're tired of mom fussing or dad fussing, and, you know, they just have a moment where they cuss out everybody in the house. They haven't done anything. They haven't hit anybody. They haven't broken anything. They're just screaming. Maybe they stormed and stumped down the stairs and pushed the door open and stormed outside for a little bit. And so the parent calls the police officer to come to the house. And normally, you know, the police officer tells you, all right, well, you know, just, you know, calm down. Or sometimes maybe they take the kid in for a day or something. But Kids that did something as simple as that ended up in front of this judge. Like I said, there's no assault charge. They haven't done anything. The judge would say, oh no, you're an out of control teen. 3 months. We're going to send you over to, I think the place was called Child Care Resources. I can't remember the name of the actual facility. But, so kids who literally had done nothing were sentenced to 2 and 3 and 4 months in these detention centers. And then when they would go back to the judge, for that check-in to see if the judge is going to commute the sentence or release them, the judge would say like, oh no, you haven't learned your lesson. I think I need to add more time. And so kids were getting locked up for skipping school, small minor offenses, things that normally you do community service for, or, things that you would not even serve any kind of time for. And so again, this is not anything new under the sun. When we talk about that whole web and that system of judges that we see, whether they're elected or appointed, like a lot of these people that are coming into these positions of power are crooked. We've seen that in our politics, and I always say follow the money. Follow the freaking money, because it will always answer questions about what is. And so we'll see what happens with this case. I'm not sure if they're going to actually get rid of Judge Michelle, and now you know how these things operate, but we shall see. But it's just crazy because, again, like, there's so much corruption in all of this. Everything is just a game, like the way they play in people's faces. And again, for a lot of those kids, what sucks about those kids that end up, especially those 4,000, because a lot of them were teenagers. But what happens with a lot of these kids that get locked up, it sucks because it already dictates how the rest of their life is going to be, because now this is on their record, And so even if they get themselves together and they try to pull themselves up, that's that phrase people like to use, and try to go to school or do certain things, some of the things that they did when they were 11 or 12 and unjustifiably put under a very heavy punitive consequence for, it follows them, and it plays a role as to whether or not they'll be eligible for scholarships or whether they'll even get into certain colleges and so on and so forth. And so those are some of the things to think about. And then some people were asking me if I saw the clip of Kyle Rittenhouse at whatever random event that was at the arena where he was coming out with the pyrotechnics and they were chanting his name like he was a hero. Listen, I'm not shocked by any of this, and to be honest, I'm at a space where I just hope people recognize and really notice what they're actually seeing. Like, Kyle Rittenhouse, in my opinion, is what you call an upkeep of the status quo, and I think one of the reasons why he is such a hero to white nationalists and racist white Americans is he represents the next generation that will come and maintain the status quo that is already here. One of the reasons why we're seeing such a kickback in regards to white Americans trying to fight and claw any and every kind of element of accountability when it comes to what happens in the United States in regards to racism and oppressive policy. What you're seeing is you're seeing so much kickback because, again, people are already fearful of the future. They're fearful of the fact that at some day and moment in time, white people will be the minority. And in their heads, they are convinced that once they become the minority, it's going to be open season on white people, when in reality, the power structure is not going anywhere because it's so embedded within the grains of the United States. And so many people already latch on to the idea of anti-blackness and imperialism and racism and everything else that it doesn't even matter if white people aren't the majority. There's enough people to still endorse that system. And so Kyle Rittenhouse represents the future for people who still push behind that. And now we're in a space where, because the veil has been lifted, people at this point are like, well, cool, let's just go all out now. It used to be, there was a period where when you really talk about like the Klan and all them back in the day, the crookedness and the racism was still out in the open, but people could hide behind the sheets. Now that we're in a space where people are being condemned for calling out racism, and now there's this kind of attack on people that are trying to challenge the status quo, and now you've even seen the term woke kind of be repurposed, and now it's used and weaponized against anybody who calls out, oppressions that take place against black people and other groups of people in the country that, deal with disenfranchisement and everything else that takes place. You're now seeing just all these different layers unfolding. So right now, at this point, the racist demographic of America doesn't even care anymore. There's nothing to hide. There's no shame because they recognize, hey, we have numbers. I didn't know you thought like this. I did too. Me too. Let's go to a rally. And so now it's open season because at one point in time, it's been no secret that a lot of people in this country have the viewpoints they have in regards to energy towards black people. And I know people are going to say, well, Kyle Rittenhouse killed white people. The question is, what were those white people out there doing and what were they fighting for? Okay, they were at a police brutality march, and when we jump into the conversation of police brutality, it's centered around the idea of anti-blackness and violence against black Americans. And so, like I said before, those people were seen as pretty much traitors or troublemakers or people that are no longer useful to the race. And so Kyle Rittenhouse did his job. That's how they see this crap. Like, you go and see some of the commentary these people have, it's almost scary, but depending on if you've been paying attention, it's expected. And so, yes, they paint him out to be a hero. He's celebrated. He's gotten to go on a whole press tour and do radio interviews. And like I said, that clip of him coming out with the pyrotechnics like it's a freaking WWE wrestling rank competition. I'm like, what the heck? This is why I say, and the thing is, like I said, I think I said this in the last segment, but even with politics, these are the people that want to continue to climb and gain more power, which is why this is not the time to want to tap out in regards to what's happening in the world, because maybe things aren't going the way everybody wants it to go. This is not the time to tap out, because them lunatics that I just saw in that clip, they are fighting and clawing to regain and latch on to the power that they can get. This is how you're getting people like a Marjorie Taylor Greene in office. She didn't even have to run against anybody. She ran unopposed and got in. All right. And so you're starting to see the extremities come into a space where it's becoming the norm. And because it's becoming the norm, people who latch on to those extreme viewpoints and those racist viewpoints and that idea of maintaining a status quo in which white people continue to be, the top tier everything and regain and hold on to all of the resources at everybody else's expense. Now people who latch on to those ideologies and viewpoints can now be empowered and come into positions of power and create policy and ensure that for the next few generations, things continue to stay the way they are or get further into a place where they want it to be. And so that's why it's like, pay attention to the details of everything that's taking place. I think we have to get into a space where multiple things can be true at once. And when you get into a space where you want to kind of be almost a one issue voter, or you only pay attention to one element when there's a million things taking place, I think that becomes a dangerous territory. But again, just like, I'm not shocked by any of that. I'm just like, yeah, and it's scary. You look at, I'm like, these are the people that they are ready to latch in and start taking over some more stuff. And that's why you're even seeing like even that library system in Texas, where now they want to go and vet the books. We've already had many conversations about the whole CRT, critical race theory thing that people are losing their sleep over, but now it's to the point where they want to pull books out of libraries. And that should tell you that you're kind of jumping into a dangerous territory. It's one thing where people already want to go and restructure what's happening in the schools. It's interesting. I'm anxious to see what happens in the state of Virginia with Youngkin coming in there, because he already said on day one when he gets up in it, the first thing he's going to go do is, there's going to be all kind of books that are going to be banned and things that students and teachers will not be allowed to talk about. So you already have that. But now when it's the library system where people have free reign to pick and choose what it is that they would like to consume, and now you have people that are trying to put in policy where people don't even have a choice in that anymore, because again, there's a status quo that needs to be maintained. And as generations progress, because the narrative that was always pushed out as I was coming up is, oh, don't worry, racism will disappear as the old racists die off, because the younger generations are just so enlightened and they were raised in the post-racial society, and they grew up on Sesame Street and reading Rainbow and in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and we're all just one kumbaya family, so all will be well. And now that is kind of being seen ripped, and people are saying, oh no, not much has changed. And even with these young kids that are coming up, a lot of them have bought into that ideology and they recognize what's up and they're willing to continue that same status quo. And so you're seeing a whole lot. All right, it's wild out here. It's wild up out here. That's all I'm gonna say. So stay on top of things. Anyway. So I want to end on a happy note. So I kind of noticed that, on these videos, because we have such heavy topics, sometimes I feel like people may leave these videos just like, I have nothing to look forward to. Because we start out in such a good mood. We be telling jokes and all this stuff, and then I shift on you. And then it's all of a sudden, because in 1922, the system told you about this, and when we get to... And so I'm like, dang, well, maybe I should kind of end on a more happier note as well. So if we're going to give all the heavy stuff, I think we got to start closing it out with something a little bit more tranquil, so people don't go to bed stressed out and start dreaming about getting stabbed in the neck. And so I saw this story, which I think is really amazing. It is about the kid Dayvon Johnson. I just want to read a piece of the article, and then we'll go from there. Not all heroes wear capes. Some are children with good hearts that happen to be in the right place at the right time. Earlier this month, a 6th grader from Oklahoma, Dayvon Johnson, performed a Heimlich maneuver on a classmate. Then that same day, Dayvon rescued an elderly woman from a burning house. The Enid News and Eagle reported a student trying to refill his water bottle used his mouth to loosen the cap. The cap slipped into his throat and the student began to choke. The choking student stumbled into Dayvon's classroom. Dayvon jumped into action and performed the Heimlich maneuver. The bottle cap popped out. The 11-year-old told Enid News and Eagle he learned the Heimlich maneuver on YouTube, calling it a valuable procedure to learn. He said, "Just in case you're in a situation I was in, you can know what to do." Later, while walking after school, Dayvon saw an elderly woman trying to escape a house fire. Again, he rushed into action, helping the elderly woman with her walker get out of the home. "I thought, oh, she's not moving fast enough, so I ran across the street and helped her to her truck," Dayvon told News on 6 Cameras. No one who knows Dayvon was surprised by his quick-thinking nature, as he wants to be an EMT. Dayvon's mother, Latoya Johnson, told Enid News and Eagle, "I'm just a proud mom." The young hero was honored by both Muskogee County Sheriff's Office and Muskogee Public Schools at a Muskogee Board of Education meeting. According to a Facebook post shared by Dayvon's mother, Mayor Marlon J. Coleman declared December 9th Dayvon Johnson Day in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Now see, that's what I'm talking about right there. Good for him. I hope his family and parents give him everything he wants for Christmas and then some. And it's crazy because I almost shifted this video back to a different energy the minute I saw the phrase EMT, because I started thinking about something totally unrelated and just how trifling somebody else was that wanted to be an EMT and did some terrible things. But we're on a positive note. So anyway, please stay safe during the holiday season. And again, subscribe, share your 2 cents, and we will catch up. All right, I'm out.
People stressing you out, pressing through the day. Toxic as the flames that's burning you up while you wishing for love, but they're smoking you stuck, you need change. Problem follow you after, declare you're in control. Don't you let reaction slow you down.